So we're Friday, July 12th, in front of the Hamilton City Hall, and we have with us Anthony Marco, and we have Ken Stone of the Coalition to Stop the War. And
Anthony Marco is the president of the Hamilton District Labor Council.
Anthony Marco is the president of the
Hamilton District Labor Council.
Anthony, could I ask you a few questions? Why are we here protesting today?
Earlier this week, there was a set of rules which came out with regards to some of the things that you would no longer be able to do if you were protesting or demonstrating on city property. And the list was compiled by a bunch of lawyers at City Hall, which I understand city councilors going to a legal team, but it was crafted in such a way to minimize risk as much as possible, and it essentially took every single ability and power out of the ability to protest and to demonstrate, to basically saying you can't use profane language, you can't hate, not just, we were asking for them to get rid of alt-right Nazi groups from the front of City Hall who were officially going to come against specific people who were mentioned in the charter, who had hate against charter-protected groups.
Which charter are we referring to?
Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So there are the identified groups which constitute hate speech. Instead, they came out with a huge generic list which didn't do any of that, and basically said if you hate anything, like if I do a protest against Doug Ford and say I hate Doug Ford technically under the new rules, they can kick me off of city property.
So, hate, first of all, it's ironic. You people were asking that neo-Nazis and groups such as that be banned from public protests?
From city property.
From city property, period, or just during protests?
Well, protesting on city property.
Okay.
So, like, obviously they could conduct business if they had individual business.
So you would like to restrict their presence on city property. That's ironic because the federal government supports Nazis in Kiev right now, which is underreported. I don't even think it's reported. So we are objecting to that, to the propagation of Nazi ideology on city property, and this is the response, a restriction of our rights and freedoms.
And it's not finalized yet, but the guidelines are out. They're supposedly going to finalize them in October, and they said that they're going to do broad-based consultations until then. So we encourage everybody to go out and go call their city councilor and say, I want to make sure that the alt-right groups are supportive of these measures. That should tell you something right off the bat. So it does nothing except restrict generally progressive groups from coming out here and demonstrating. And so it's had the complete opposite effect from where the original intent was. And I can understand how legalese can get twisted into things and risk management can get tied into things. But it's really become something that's scary. It's one of those kind of omnipresent and ominous things which is creeping up on us. And we could really be in a situation within the next year whereby if a labor union wanted to come in front of City Hall and do a protest or a strike action, they couldn't do it.
Well, it seems to me a clampdown on our freedoms, because if we have a list of 12 things that you can do, including profanity, then if one person in a crowd of 50 happened to swear, in theory they could use this bylaw to shut down the protest. So it seems like an under the radar or a little loophole that authorities could use to shut down democratic process.
They're bundling everything under the name of hate groups. However, they're not choosing any kind of charter metric to decide what a hate group is. So technically, hate speech is identified very clearly under the criminal code, that it has to be against somebody who is identified as a group in the charter, whether it's by race, whether it's by religion, whatever it is. They're choosing to blow that wide open and just say, if you hate anything. And so that becomes a huge problem for us because guess what? I'm allowed to hate Doug Ford. I'm allowed to hate a politician.
Absolutely.
As long as it's not on the basis of any of that other stuff.
Okay, so it sounds to me it's too restrictive. Ken Stone, could you add your opinion to this?
About 2 years ago in 2017, I led a successful delegation to the General Issues Committee of City Council, and we asked them to ban the use of city facilities to hate groups. The mayor, it was a successful delegation because the mayor himself put a motion on the floor that no city facilities be made available to hate groups, and it passed unanimously. But he pointed out at the time that in front of City Hall there were no rules. People did not need permits to come here and demonstrate, and in the past our organization, the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War, has had many demonstrations here about a multitude of subjects: Palestine, Syria, and so on. And now we find with this week, this list coming out, our ability to hold demonstrations here in front of City Hall will be limited by things like restrictions on using a bullhorn, handing out flyers, passing the hat, making loud noises, etc., etc. In fact, what the mayor is doing is exactly what he said he wouldn't do 2 years ago, and that is restrict the freedom of ordinary Hamiltonians to have peaceful protests in front of City Hall. That's why we're here today, and that's why we're upset about these proposed rules which are going to stifle legitimate dissent.
And I think
we will be participating in the consultations against these rules in the next couple of months.
Naomi Wolf argues that there's one way for oppressive fascistic societies to clamp down is to what she calls over-permitization. Well, I probably pronounced that correct. Too many permits. In other words, if a group, a peaceful group, needs to protest at such and such a place, they need to sign a permit and have a permit approved, which effectively contradicts the whole notion of freedom of expression, because the town could shut that down with too many permit stipulations.
And permits usually come with costs and time limits and insurance requirements. Let me tell you that this whole thing is leading to a very bad situation.
Further to that, Naomi Wolf says that for protests to be effective, we have to get in the way of business as usual. And if we have to go through an expensive permit process, that basically contradicts the aim of effective protest. It's controlled protest.
I couldn't agree more.
One of the rules, I mean, one of the most generic rules they have is you can't create a nuisance. The definition of protest is to create a nuisance. I mean,
effective protest means nuisance. Get in the way.
Effective protest means you've blown through nuisance 20 minutes ago. Like, the organization of a protest is a nuisance. Beyond that, it should be way more than that. It should be, it's supposed to be something that busts through any kind of barriers that there are. We're in a scenario right now whereby if these rules went through as they did, it's not, and I'm sure that when some of the consultations are going to happen, you're going to have councillors who are saying, well, of course we didn't mean it in this way, of course we didn't mean it in this way. But to leave that latitude to the police on a week-by-week basis is really problematic. To give them the leeway to come in and be able to bust anybody anytime they want to is problematic.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.